Hello, and you're listening to the first edition of the No Cautions podcast with Trevor Mater and Jacob Blair, your only podcast here in Maryville to bring you all things auto racing and NASCAR related. And Jacob, there was some racing this weekend, wasn't there? I kind of forgot.
Yeah, just a little bit of racing, nothing too big.
Just the second, or one of the top three biggest races in the world, right?
Yeah, I mean the Daytona 500 is probably right there with the Grand Prix of Monaco, the Indianapolis 500, stuff like that.
Yeah, the only difference is that one's in February and the other two are in May. It'd be cool if they were all on the same day, wouldn't it?
It would.
But instead we get the Coke 600, which is still pretty good. We'll take it. So, yeah, the 60th running of the Great American Race was this past weekend, and we have a lot to talk about this weekend, don't we?
A lot to talk about.
Yeah, it never disappoints. Daytona 500, it's weird because people always call it the Super Bowl of auto racing, except it comes at the beginning of the year, whereas every other sport, the Super Bowl, the World Series, all that comes at the end of the year. It ends the season. So it's kind of unique. You never know what to expect. Sometimes you expect things and it happens. Sometimes you expect things and it doesn't happen. And we'll get more into it later, but I don't know about you. But really, there wasn't anything I expected that happened on Sunday. Was there anything you could take away that you expected?
Really, the only thing I expected was Fords to dominate the race. But get to 10 to go, who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Ryan Blaney goes ahead and dominates the race. That's really all I expected. And the only reason I thought that is because of what happened in the duels, what happened with the clashes. The Fords looked a little bit stronger with their plate program. But it's still the Daytona 500 to get down to it. Everyone wants to win. Everyone's going to do some crazy stuff to try to win.
And it's funny because you look back the last couple of years coming into the Sunday of the 500, the narrative have been Toyota's dominating. I mean, I thought at least last year with the new Toyota car, I thought, okay, there might be a little bit of time. They might see some struggle, and really there wasn't. They transitioned in just fine for the most part. A couple guys struggled early on in the season. A couple years ago, Toyota dominated and ended up finishing, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever in the 500 when Hamlin won it and Truex got second. And Matt Kenseth led most of it. So, it was good to see Ford's kind of on their...
And even last year, the Toyotas were fast, and if it wasn't for the... flat tire Kyle Busch had that took out, I think, two of the Ford Gibbs Toyotas.
And Martin Truex ran out of gas with 2 to go or 3 to go, something like that. I mean, they've been fast. Ford was the one that I was kind of, Chevrolet with the new Camaros, it was tough, what to expect from them, and they've had some silly season stuff, some new guys and some new seats. But it was good to see Ford have a good weekend because I feel like they've been kind of that third brand for a while, and it helped when Stuart Haas came over there. They've got some new talent in that manufacturer now, and they had a good weekend.
Yeah, and again, just the speed that these Fords had. I mean, you look at these guys, the Penske Fords with Logano, Keselowski, and then now obviously Blaney going
and even
into
Paul
that
Menard,
house
really.
car. And then you look at Harvick and really, Stenhouse, guys like that. The Fords,
Eric Almirola, Paul Menard. I mean,
if the Fords were strong. Of course, they didn't end up winning the race, but they've got to be happy with at least the plate program they've got right now.
Like I said, we'll jump more into a recap of the Daytona 500 here later. Here's what we got in store for you today. We're going to kind of just touch on a little bit of the rule changes that NASCAR made in the 2018 season. We'll jump into the truck race that took place on Friday night as well as the Xfinity race on Saturday. And the big one, the Daytona 500 on Sunday, and then we'll cap off by looking ahead to next week. They're in Atlanta. All 3 series are running, and we'll make our championship predictions. We were going to do this last week. Unfortunately, a busy week last week. We couldn't get together, but let's go ahead and jump right into it. Jacob, anytime there's a new season, there's a lot of changes, and not anything different this year. A handful of changes, on the track with rules and as well as drivers jumping around.
Yeah, I think the biggest change, and I don't think we're going to really see the effects of this change until we get to Atlanta this next weekend, but it's taking 6 crew members and taking it down to 5, and then adding to the fact that the gas man is only allowed to fuel these race cars. We saw kind of the effect this had. It slowed pit stops down about 4 or 5 seconds when they put together good pit stops. But the interesting thing about this new rule is no one knows really what to do yet. If you watch the pit stops, everyone's got a different idea of how to choreograph these pit stops. So when we get to Atlanta, when drivers are going to want new tires after every single green flag lap, and pit stops are going to be extremely important, and there's not the draft and track positions extremely important, that's where we're going to see what this effect of 5 guys from the 6 guys. Then obviously the Camaros with their new body, the Chevys with their new Camaro body. I don't think there's going to be much effect there, but that. And then the only other rule change I really think was much of a rule change was the overtime rules, where they got rid of the overtime line finally and put it back to where it had always been, is it's the green, white, checkered. You get the white flag. Whatever flag comes next ends the race. The cool thing this year is they're going to do it until they get the white flag.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, going back a couple years ago, it was 3 attempts. I know the Truck Series at one time had the unlimited attempts, and then it got ridiculous, so they limited it to 3. And I'm in favor of that. I mean, honestly, I'm a little bit extreme with this, but I would actually be fine if they just said, you know what, we're going to run until we get the checkered flag.
That's what the ARCA race did, and we saw what happened there. I mean, they were there forever trying to finish that ARCA race because they just kept wrecking. But
it keeps it exciting, keeps people watching.
Well, the worst thing for me, for a race fan, is to pay money, and ticket prices are not cheap to go to the top-level races.
Definitely not if you went to the Daytona 500.
Yeah. And the worst thing is to watch the cars roll across the start-finish line at 80 miles an hour, single file, behind a pace car. That's one of the worst feelings as a race fan.
It's a very anticlimactic ending, and that's like, I was really glad on Sunday they didn't call the caution on the last lap. I mean, it would have done much good. And like I said, we'll jump more into that later. Yeah, there were a couple other outside changes as far as strengthening the regulations for Cup drivers in the Xfinity Series. I believe it's a limit of 7 races now that a driver declaring for Cup points with more than 5 years of experience can run. There's some other rules in that too.
Only 5. It's 5 truck races they're allowed to run.
I think that sounds right.
I believe they have said no chase races at all.
So no chase races.
You will not see any Cup drivers in any of the chase races.
So, I mean, I'm so interested to see, because how does that apply for a guy like Chase Elliott, who's only got 3 years of Cup experience?
Well, I know originally when that rule was made, it was 4 guys that had 5 years. Is that still?
That's what I read. Is that 5? So you look at a guy like Kyle Larson, who Eric Jones.
We'll still see all those guys.
Yeah. So
but I still think the rule is, regardless of if you are a Cup, you're getting points for Cup. Come chase time, no Cup driver.
Yeah. No, I know that. I know that is the rule
for the chase. But we'll see. And you already see it with the entry list at Atlanta is Kevin Harvick's in the '98 car.
Yeah.
Well, you don't see that very often. Is Kevin Harvick and these guys that want Cup drivers in their Xfinity program, where they're going to start now that the rule has limited these Cup drivers, they're going to start shopping for other Cup drivers to step in their car. So we might see some guys like I think you mentioned Jamie McMurray.
I think Jamie Murray's driving some races, and Jamie Murray hasn't ran a handful of races in the last.
So we're going to see some new Cup drivers in the Xfinity Series.
So, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. can run as many as he wants this year. I mean, because he's not declaring. And I know he's interested in running at least a couple. Richmond and maybe Talladega potentially, and Iowa is supposedly on his bucket list. So I don't know. I like that they're doing that to an extent, because to me it's boring when you go out the same. We watch the Xfinity race, and it's like watching the Cup guys dominate younger guys. It'd be like if Eric Hosmer, Mike Trout, or someone went and played in the minor leagues for a week, just because they could. I mean, I get it. And as far as from the sponsorship standpoint, would you rather invest your money in Kyle Busch or Matt Tifft? Kyle Busch, or Brad Keselowski or Austin Cindric? Brad Keselowski. And fans have to do their part too. If fans are out there saying, well, I think it's bogus that Kyle Busch goes out and runs every single Xfinity race and he wins 12 races a year against guys that have less experience than him and yada yada, that's fine. But then do your part by, going to the races, watching them. I mean, because you go to a lot of these standalone events like Iowa Speedway, which, if you've never watched races at Iowa Speedway, it is a ton of fun. But their attendance has been down over the years because it's a standalone event. So, I mean, it's kind of a two-way street there. I like that they're doing that, but we'll see how it plays out. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents on that. Any other rule changes or anything that I'm missing? I mean, you two mentioned the pit crews.
Yeah, really, the only other thing is the new way they are attacking these race cars with this new laser inspection. I don't know what it is. It's super technical. Yeah. They just scan something over a race car, and then they yell at guys when something's wrong. There is one rule that did actually was Austin Dillon in the Xfinity Series that I was not aware of, that we learned is now if you fail certain rules in pre-race,
your crew chief
is ejected from the weekend, which I kind of like that. I think that's kind of
I think it'll get down on He'll kind of put their foot down. And if I read this correctly too, they took away the term encumbered. Am I right? Did I get that?
Yes.
I don't know what the hell they're going to call it now. I mean,
I just wish they'd. Oh, you failed post-race technical inspection. Let's do what everyone else in the country does, and let's disqualify
and that's
you.
my thing is, like last year, Joey Logano wins at Richmond. Was it Richmond or Martinsville? It's one of those two. He wins the race, and then he fails the post-race inspection, and they take the win away from him technically, but they don't really take the win away from him. He ends up not making the playoffs. Denny Hamlin, later on in the season, same exact thing at Darlington. They take the win away, but they don't take it. No, just say, you know what? Like you said, you go to any local, dirt track or asphalt track in the country, in any series, and if your car is not legal, you're disqualified.
Well, and with that, we're not talking like some big thing. I know a lot of these violations these cup teams are making are small, but if you roll across the scales at your local dirt track and you're supposed to be 2,500 pounds and the scale reads 2,501, you're done. You're disqualified.
Yeah.
There's no leeway at these local tracks, and NASCAR needs to say, I don't care why you failed. You failed. You don't win this race.
And, I mean, there are things, if it happens in race, as far as heights and stuff, you can maybe go back and look at those. But, yeah, certain things where it's like, okay, you were 50 pounds lighter than you should have been. Where this wasn't where it should have been and whatever. Yeah, you're disqualified. I mean, that's my opinion. It'll never happen because the sponsors and stuff involved pay a lot of good money for that. So I don't think it'll ever happen, but I wish it would. But, yeah, I mean, that's really about it for the rule changes. There were some silly season changes we alluded to. We can kind of touch on those just a tad bit.
There was quite a lot, and a lot of them were with some of the smaller teams. We didn't see a lot of movement from the bigger teams, but kind of the bigger moves are more guys not necessarily switching rides, just guys stepping out of the sport, guys moving in. So Alex Bowman steps in for Dale Jr. in the 88 car. Eric Jones steps into the 20 car for Matt Kenseth. The 77 car, which he was driving, is no longer in existence. That car is gone. Another one, Eric Almirola, moves to the 10 car to replace.
Allows Bubba Wallace to move up. I mean, so it was kind of a cycle of things.
And then some of the smaller teams, I know Michael McDowell went to Front Row Motorsports.
Casey Kane came to William Byron, ended up taking kids. So it all kind of.
If you're not a big race fan, watching the Daytona 500 might have been confusing for a while because there were a little bit more changes in the driver lineup than there has been in the past.
Yeah, and that's because sponsorships, it's been so tough to get sponsors in recent years, and they're so quick to pull the trigger. That's why Casey Kane isn't at Everett Kendrick anymore, is because of sponsors, and that's why Paul Menard can go wherever he wants.
That's one we forgot. Paul Menard's now in the 21.
Yeah, because he brings a sponsor with him. I mean, and Brendan Gaughan's the same way. I mean, Brendan Gaughan could go to any ride he wants to, basically, and he brings a sponsor with his stepdad running a hotel and casino in Las Vegas. So, yeah, there's some of your silly season changes. Like I said, there were a lot of them. They all kind of linked together, though, and yeah, I'll be interested to see how some of those play out. I liked some of them. I didn't like some of them, but we'll see. Like I said, it's Daytona, so you can't really take a ton away yet. We'll just go ahead and jump right into it now. The NextEra Energy Resources 250, which was the Camping World Truck Series race on Friday night. I was gone over the week. I had work obligations, so I didn't get to watch the Truck Series race, the Xfinity race, but I did catch the highlights. I know you watched all three of them, am I right?
Watched all three. Wasn't able to watch the Trucks or Xfinity live, but I did go back and watch
all of them. What were the takeaways from the Truck Series that you saw?
Johnny Sauter's really good at restrictor plate racetracks. That's really it's these young kids at trucks. The trucks are very unstable at restrictor plate tracks. They move around a ton, and with all these, I mean, the trucks is where you get your 18, 19-year-old kids that are getting their start, and then you mix them with the Johnny Sauters, the Matt Craftons, and the problem with that is you wreck a lot of trucks. And Johnny Sauter just seems to always find a way to miss all the wrecks, stay out front, and it really just, I think we were midway through stage 2, and I was watching it. Johnny Sauter's going to win this race. And sure enough, Johnny Sauter wins the race. That's really the only takeaway from the trucks is they wrecked a lot of race cars and, race trucks. And Johnny Sauter's really good at restrictor plate racetracks.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's the experience, too, when you look at it. I mean, he's driven just about everything you can at a restrictor plate. Johnny Sauter might be the most veteran guy in the Truck Series now. And we've seen guys like that before in the past be successful in these restrictor plate tracks in the trucks. Think back to Todd Bodine. Johnny Benson had some success. Mike Skinner as well. So, when I saw on Friday night that Johnny Sauter won the truck race, I was not in the least bit surprised. Was there anyone in the top 5 or top 10 that really stuck out to you? Like I said, it's Daytona, so the top 5 always gets kind of wonky.
Yeah, well, really, finishing third was Joe Nemechek. He had a good run. Then there was Scott Lagasse Jr. in the 20 car. Something that the Fox commentators could not remember is that Scott Lagasse Jr. was in the 20 and Austin Hill was in the 02. They were getting those guys mixed up a lot. But Scott Lagasse Jr. finished fifth. And the one I really enjoyed watching was Jordan Anderson in the 3. He had a really good run going, spun coming to the checkered flag, was up in the top 5, ended up finishing 9th. But again, the big thing about the truck race is only 21 cars are running, trucks. 21 trucks were running at the end of this race, only 15 on the lead lap, and it only ended up being 9 in the lead pack as they were coming down to the final laps.
That was pretty good for this weekend, wasn't it?
Having 21 trucks
out of 35?
Out of 32 running. They were running at the end of the race. Now, some of these, when we say running, they were running around with like half a spoiler and no nose and doing what they can to finish the race. So not all of them were up to full speed, but still having 21 cars that were still functional at the end of a race is pretty good for trucks at Daytona.
Yeah, we'll do a quick rundown of your top 10. Johnny Sauter took home the win. He led 59 laps. Justin Haley finished second. Joe Nemechek third. Ben Rhodes fourth. Scott Lagasse Jr. fifth. Grant Enfinger sixth. Spencer Davis seventh. Dalton Sargent eighth. Jordan Anderson ninth. And Justin Fontaine 10th. Johnny Sauter picked up about as many points you can, 59 points. So a good week for him. And is he running full time this year? I know last year was there kind of he didn't run full time last year, did he?
He did.
Did he? Was it Timothy Peters? That's what I'm thinking of. Didn't run.
Which just in the world of truck racing is David Gilliland Racing has bought a lot of the Red Horse Racing equipment, so we're going to see some. That's one thing we'll get into a little bit too. Is there was a lot of new truck teams, a lot of new Xfinity teams that made their way to the racetrack. I know it's Daytona, but just new trucks and new Xfinity cars, which that's always exciting to see new teams come to the plate. But then some other, maybe, I guess, disappointing runs at Daytona is Matt Crafton. He finished 19th, got caught up in a crash. Noah Gragson, 23rd. Myatt Snyder, he moved into the 13 car, replacing Cody Coughlin, who moved to the 2 with GMS Racing. He had a rough night. John Hunter Nemechek, who's not running full-time in the Truck Series this year, he's got some Xfinity rides with Ganassi. He finished 25th. Stuart Friesen, who really started to put together a good truck program, he finished 27th, and then Parker Kligerman finished 28th. Those are some of your guys that crashed out early in this one.
And Kligerman's a guy that normally on the restrictor plates runs pretty well. So, and Chris Fontaine, too, has had some good runs at the restrictor plates in the past. So, yeah, there's a quick look at your Camping World Truck Series rundown from this past weekend. They will be in Atlanta later on Saturday afternoon, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, it's a doubleheader at Atlanta. Xfinity will run, I think, right around 1 noonish, and then right afterwards they'll switch everything over and then go run the truck race. Yeah,
so that'll be interesting for the Xfinity or the Camping World Truck Series race on Saturday. We'll just jump right in now to the Xfinity Series race, the Power Shares QQQ 300. You know, it was a wild one, Jacob.
Yeah, it was actually pretty calm for most of the race. There was one decent wreck early with Austin Cindric that also took out Christopher Bell, as well as I believe Michael Annett. Those guys were knocked out early, but other than that, it was very calm through most of the race. And then the last 10 laps happened.
Yeah, that's normally what happens.
So in this, we got to the last 10 laps, and with the new overtime rule of where we're just going to do it as many times as we possibly can, there were 5 overtimes in this race. So the last 10 laps of this race were crazy, and cars were basically wrecking all over the place, and in the end, I believe it was the closest finish in NASCAR history time-wise, because of how fast the cars were going in. Ended up being like 0.0004.
The margin of victory, I have it right in front of me, courtesy of racingreference.info, 0.0004 seconds.
So I know NASCAR had some fun with that, messing with people, saying it was because they rounded and said the margin of victory was just all zeros.
Yeah.
Which confused some people.
Yeah, well, when you look at the picture, and we'll have this up on the podcast, it's close. They had to basically go to a photo to tell between Tyler Reddick and Elliott Sadler.
And what was weird about it is watching it, I kind of could tell it was Reddick. And you listen to the commentators, and they thought it was Sadler. And it was just so close. It was a good finish to a mess of the last 10 laps. And it was exciting.
Yeah, a quick look at their top 10. Tyler Reddick takes home the win, his second. He won last year in Kentucky. I believe it's his second Xfinity win.
Yes.
Yeah, he picks up his second win, and assuming he runs all year, which I believe is a plan for him.
It should be now, because they always got a spot in the chase. So that might help grab
if he runs all year
he needed.
So he'll have a spot in the chase. Elliott Sadler comes home second. A guy that I probably would have picked to win, Ryan Reed, finished third. He's a guy that has just weird luck when it comes to restrictor plates. Kaz Gralla, he's a guy that won the Truck Series race there last year. He finishes fourth. Garrett Smithley fifth. Spencer Gallagher sixth. Ryan Truex seventh. Daniel Suarez kind of ran up front all race, ends up finishing eighth. Ross Chastain ninth and Brandon Jones 10th. Jeff Green finished 11th. How about that? So when you look at this top 10, Jacob, anybody that kind of sticks out to you as far as wow? I mean, I got one guy that I kind of think.
Really, it's that zero car of Garrett Smith. That's a great run for that team. Team you normally see outside the top 20. A good run for them. But then Kaz Gralla in that 24 car, as well as Spencer Gallagher in the 23 car. GMS still fairly new to the Xfinity Series. I know they've got a really good truck program, but still trying to find their way in the Xfinity Series to get 2 cars in the top 6. That's pretty good.
I think that's good because, you know,
actually, I think I misspoke. I don't think those are team cars. I don't think they're the same.
Gallagher and Gralla are two different teams, is what it's showing me. But speaking of Gallagher, you know, this is a team last year there was a lot of talk that they could move up to the Cup Series, and I didn't think Spencer Gallagher was ready. I'm not saying it. You know, if he has a good season this year, then maybe he'll be ready. And I don't blame them for wanting to put, you know, him in their car. But, I mean, he needs to have a good season, and that's a good run for him to get it started. I mean, because last year, like you said, they kind of struggled a little bit.
Yeah, and the one other thing is Brandon Jones finished 10th, and just real quick, he and Matt Tifft kind of switched rides. Matt Tifft went to Richard Childress Racing. Brandon Jones moved to Joe Gibbs Racing. So that was a good way for Brandon Jones to start off his season at Joe Gibbs Racing. And then earlier, I misspoke. Kaz Gralla, those are not GMS cars. They look like they should be.
Yeah.
Because Kaz Gralla, always like Kaz Gralla.
Did he run for GMS?
He runs GMS in the Truck Series. And then they always put a circle around his number, and he had that. So I'm like, well, they must still be with GMS. It's actually JGL Racing that he's driving with in the Xfinity Series.
Anybody in watching the Xfinity race that kind of disappointed you?
Really, it was some of the Cup guys.
Yeah, Austin Dillon.
I mean, a lot. You go down your list, and you got Joey Logano, Austin Dillon, Kyle Larson, all outside the top 25. Eric Almirola as well.
Yeah,
and then some of the Xfinity guys that got caught up early in crashes: Christopher Bell, Austin Cindric, Justin Allgaier, Daniel Hemrick as well. A lot of guys with the chase format. It's not necessarily a bad way to start the season, but it's just, you crashed out early. You didn't get a good way to start the season. Now you've got a wrecked race car that you've got to worry about and get ready for Atlanta. Yeah, so some of those guys, you know, Cindric's running, he's splitting, right, with Ty Majeski? Yes, it's actually 3 guys. It's Chase Briscoe, Ty Majeski, and Austin Cindric. Austin Cindric, yeah. And then Austin Cindric actually will be driving full-time. The races, he's not in the 60 car. He's going to be in a Penske car. He's with 22, that's right. So this week at Atlanta, he'll actually be in the 12 car. Yep. So Cindric's running full-time, but Majeski and Briscoe are not. So, yeah, and Christopher Bell's running full-time this year. Am I right? Christopher Bell is in the 20 car. Brandon Jones is in the 19. Is Jones running full-time? I thought he was maybe splitting. Maybe. That's one I'm not for sure. I hope he's running. I've always wanted Joe Gibbs to run 2 full-time Xfinity drivers, but they always like to let their Cup drivers. Yeah, or maybe it's the 18. I can tell you, I have the entry list. I can pull that up real quick, but I thought I read that Brandon Jones was going to be in it for a certain amount of races. And they like giving their Cup guys a chance to. Yeah, you're right, because Kyle Benjamin is in the 19 car this weekend. I can't remember if it was in 18 or 19, but I knew he was in one of them. And I don't quite remember who's in the 18 car, but it's hard to keep up with the Joe Gibbs Xfinity drivers lineups because they'll switch those guys around all the time. I mean, they'll put anybody in any car, and in the past it's been Denny Hamlin, Matt Kenseth, Kyle Busch. Well, obviously now with Matt Kenseth gone, it'll be. Denny Hamlin's kind of backed away from running a lot of the Xfinity races, so it's mainly going to be Kyle Busch, Daniel Suarez, Eric Jones, even. So yeah, that's kind of a look at the Xfinity Series here so far. They'll be in Atlanta this week for the Renai 250. That'll be, as Jacob alluded to, on Saturday afternoon. The race will start at green flag time is estimated at 1:16.
So I know we didn't make a Truck Series prediction, but do you have a Xfinity Series prediction?
It's going to be hard for me to pick against Christopher Bell this year.
Yeah. No, I don't blame you. Kyle Benjamin's the 18 this week, by the way. Brandon Jones in the 19.
Still in the 19.
And then Christopher Bell in the 20. I hate to do it this week, but as far as actually picking the Xfinity race, the last 5 races in Atlanta have been won by Kyle Busch or Kevin Harvick. Well, Kyle Busch isn't there, but Kevin Harvick is. So I know he's still kind of learning with that Biaggi. Biaggi did best racing car, but they've won races before, albeit at restrictor plates. But I got to take Kevin Harvick. I feel like he'll probably be just fine. He's got that track figured out.
And one thing with the Xfinity Series this year is one thing that the rules that keep these guys out of Xfinity cars is there is still a difference between an Xfinity car and a Cup car.
Yeah.
You still got to take some time to get used to driving a slower car, a car that reacts a little bit differently. So I'm wondering if we're going to see a little bit more Xfinity regulars pick up wins when the Cup guys are there, just because the Cup guys are not as used to the Xfinity cars as they have been in the past, with them running 20 races a year or so.
Yeah, one guy to keep it. Austin Cindric's in the 12th car this weekend. One guy to keep an eye on, I think, throughout the season. I don't know that we'll see him win, but I think maybe at a restrictor plate, Ryan Truex. It's a guy that I've always liked.
And that kind of racing team has gotten better every year. I was kind of sad to see Blake Cook leave that ride, but Ryan Truex is going to step in. He might be an upgrade. It'll be interesting to see what, but it's a good opportunity for Ryan Truex. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that team actually fight for wins on tracks other than restrictor plates. That they've worked hard, they've got that program running fairly well. I think we'll see some good runs out of that 11 car this year. Yeah,
and as I look at this, I think Kevin Harvick's the only full-time Cup regular that is running this weekend. Because Joe Logano's in the 22 car, but you look at the 42, John Hunter Nemechek's going to make his Xfinity debut in that car. And then, Kyle Busch isn't running this week. So it's just Kevin Harvick and Joey Logano. It's hard to bet against them, but I feel pretty confident taking the field.
Yeah, it'll be. I think one cool thing about Atlanta is the tire wear, and it always makes for interesting races. Handling is a premium, tire management's a premium, and you really. That's why I think we've seen Cup guys dominate this race, is just because of the tire wear, and a lot of younger guys don't quite understand tire management at the level that the Cup guys do, and I think that's where we see this almost Cup domination at Atlanta in the Xfinity Series. But with the limited Cup guys and with some of the drivers we have now in the Xfinity Series, it'll be a good race.
Yeah, I hope so. I think all weekend it will be. There was another race this weekend that we haven't got to. It was part race, part demolition derby.
Weren't all of them like that?
Yeah,
though?
This one was like it was a Great American Demolition Derby, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, for those of you that didn't get the chance to watch Daytona 500, you missed out. It was quite the event. Regardless of what you thought of the outcome, it was a really kind of compelling event that told a story, and I like races that tell a story, and I think it did just that. Austin Dillon ends up leading just one lap, but it was the one that matters, and he ends up picking up the Daytona 500 win.
And another one right behind him was Darrell Walsh Jr. in the 43, so it was really cool to see the 3 and the 43.
And the 11 with Denny Hamlin as well. I mean, You look at the history of those cars, pretty cool.
But this, like Trevor, like you said, it was a mess.
Yeah.
And we kind of knew that coming in after what we'd seen in the Clash, what we'd seen at the duels with this new ride height rule. And it took so much essentially rear downforce off these race cars that I don't think they were expecting it to take, getting these cars so low to the ground that these were extremely unstable. I thought we were actually going to have more problems in the actual 500 than we did. And that's just because these guys are really good.
There wouldn't have been any cars left if we had more problems than we actually did.
And I think that some of that comes, they had the practice on Friday and Saturday to fix the issue we saw in the duels where these cars were spinning out on the straightaway just because of the air.
Well, you look at the wreck, the last wreck with Kurt Busch. When
Ryan Blaney never touched it.
Yeah, and I watched it the first time. I was watching it with my girlfriend and her family, and her dad and I kept saying, there's going to be a wreck. And I kept seeing him get squirrely. I'm like, nope, that's not it. And right as they cut away, you could see Kurt Busch get around. And at first I was like, I think Blaney got into him. And the more they showed the replay, it made it pretty obvious that, it's just the way the cars were. Busch had taken enough air off of the draft that it just turned the car around.
Well, and then several of the other wrecks were, it was kind of the same deal where these cars were just so unstable. The lightest little tap, it was getting them squirrely. We saw that at the end of stage one where guys were throwing blocks that should never have been thrown at that point in the race, knock out a bunch of cars. We got the wreck with Chase Elliott where the same kind of thing happened where it just was this little touch, and then we wreck a bunch of race cars. It kind of had the same feel as last year where we never really had the really big one.
There's a lot of decent sized
But there was a lot of decent-sized ones where you get to the end of the race and there really weren't a whole lot of guys left. I think 25 cars ended up finishing the race, and only
25 finished, 10 on the lead
10
lap.
were on the lead lap.
Yeah. So if you go back to last year at Talladega, would they have 10 cars finish and on the lead lap or something like that?
Well, even the 500 last year, it was the same way where there wasn't a whole lot of guys. I mean, Kurt Busch won the race last year with a car.
Last year, 15 cars finished on the lead lap. There were 25 that finished. So, yeah, Kurt Busch won with a beat-up race car. So
it was a race where so many cars wrecked early. The stage one wreck took out a bunch of cars. The Chase Elliott wreck that took out a bunch more. Where the last 70 laps or so, there weren't a whole lot of cars to even run in a 2-groove, 3-groove pack where they're all single file. And then William Byron blows a tire, and that little last 7 laps was intense. The moves these guys were making up until the wreck with Ryan Blaney and Kurt Busch.
Yeah, I mean, guys were just saying screw it.
They were getting after it, making it moves, and the runs they were getting. As I haven't seen runs like this in a long time where they could just. We saw the issue with Martin Truex Jr. where he was one car that clearly did not have the speed to do anything. Once the field displaced him on that restart, you saw guys like Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney. Once he got past the speed with these cars, they could get these huge runs, and then guys were trying to throw blocks and weren't able to react quick enough because of the speed these guys were coming with. And essentially that's what caused the wreck with Kurt Busch and Ryan Blaney is just the runs, everyone just kind of converged on each other.
Well, and the thing that I found crazy is, these runs, you would get a guy like Denny Hamlin who would get a great run from, was it Bubba Wallace was pushing him?
I think one of them, yeah.
Yeah, so he'd get a great run from Bubba Wallace, and he'd get way out front. Well, then when he's way out front, there's nobody pushing him, and you got Ryan Blaney on the outside who's getting a great push from Eric Almirola, and they would all just kind of rubber band back together, and it was a cycle, really. Blaney would get way out front, and then it'd rubber band back in, and Hamlin would get way out front, and then Almirola takes the lead. And just the last 10 laps might be I don't know if it's the best, but it's got to be up there with the best last 10 laps in the history of the Daytona 500.
Yeah, the one with Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., the one where they ran a lot of laps, pretty much door to door. That one was pretty good, but this one, they were just side by side and could have gotten away from each other. This one, these guys were coming with heads of steam and making moves and passing. Real quick, I want to talk about Ryan Blaney. Absolutely dominated this race.
118 laps.
118 laps led. When's the last time you've heard that many laps led at a restrictor plate track? That car was extremely fast, but it's still Daytona, and
he made one bad move the whole race. He got hung out to dry there towards the end, and what, he ended up finishing 6th, something like that?
Ended up finishing 7th.
Yeah. And what's crazy about that is you look at the end of that race, and like I said, I was watching, I'm thinking there's, every car in the lead lap had a chance to win it at some point. I mean, you look at the guys that finished up there. Who ended up finishing 3rd? It's escaping me.
Denny Hamlin. And then 4th was
Joey Logano, who had nothing with 10 to go. I mean, and you look at Paul Menard, who just was kind of there all race, had a shot to win it. Bubba Wallace, I mean.
Well, even Chris Buescher, who had finished 5th, I know he doesn't have quite the equipment that some of the other guys do, but he had opportunities to make moves to win this race.
Yeah, it was crazy. Just kind of talking about the last lap, Eric Almirola. I've always been a guy that I've always liked Eric Almirola. I've liked the way he's carried himself. His abilities, that's another thing, for another day. But when he took the white flag and Eric Almirola's leading the race, I'm thinking it'd be really cool to see Eric Almirola win this race.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was really, a lot of the guys up there be like, it'd be really cool if we could get this race. Darrell Wallace Jr., if he could win, if Chris Buescher could win.
The one guy that I wasn't rooting for, really, is the one guy that ended up winning.
Yeah, but before we get to the last lap, turn 3, what happened there, I want to really go over the restart for the overtime where Denny Hamlin's leading. He gets to choose his lane. I don't quite understand. Not throwing anything bad on Chris Buescher, but this is all about motor, all about car. You've got a Richard Childress Racing car starting fourth in Austin Dillon. Chris Buescher starting third on the inside. He takes the inside. The better pusher there is going to be Austin Dillon.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand why he put himself in front of Chris Buescher. Other than he kind of did say Chris Buescher had been pushing well all race. It just on that restart, Buescher could not hang to the bumper of Denny Hamlin. That's what pushed Almirola out to the lead. And then that inside line never got formed with Paul Menard and some of those other guys, and that allowed Darrell Wallace and some other guys to get up there. But I think now we should get to that move on the back straightaway.
In case you didn't see it, Eric Almirola takes the lead. He's leading with the white flag, and he's doing what he's got to. He did what he had to do. You know, he tried to make that car 12 foot wide, and he goes down low to block Hamlin, comes back up to block Austin Dillon, and it just so happens when he goes up to block him, he gets clipped. And you know, Fox was on board with Eric Almirola when it happened, so it was kind of a bummer. You didn't get to totally see it, but it was kind of cool because you knew when he went around, you're like, oh no, this is not good. And he goes around, ends up finishing 11th, which tells you how many cars didn't finish the race. And Austin Dillon's the leader and ends up winning the Daytona 500 on the 20th anniversary of Dale Earnhardt's Daytona 500 win. So that was a cool moment, but man, that final lap was just wow.
Yeah, I watched the move between Eric Almirola and Austin Dillon, I think now upwards of 20 times. Still trying to figure out and make a decision about, the big debate is, was it dirty or was it, you're just racing hard? And my opinion is that you're just racing hard. It's the last lap of the Daytona 500, and there was a view from the back straightaway which really showed it is, and then when you compile that with a side view of it, is you've got to remember that Austin Dillon has someone behind him as well. And what it really looked like what happened is Austin Dillon gave an initial bump to Eric, then went to go to the inside. Eric went to block. Dillon went back to the outside, and at that point, Dillon was still getting a push from behind, and then they just came together. And I've also seen a lot of stuff where Austin Dillon, they said he could have gone to the inside. Well, for a while there, he was not clear of Denny Hamlin yet.
No.
When they made contact, he was. But before that, he went back to the outside, and if you watch it from the back straightaway, Eric Almirola blocked to the middle of the racetrack. So Austin Dillon could make the decision to go low or high. He went high, but he was already so close. He got into the back of him. It was just, you're racing on the last lap of the Daytona 500. You're not going to lift.
And that's what it comes down to in a situation like that. When you're blocking like that, you're anticipating or hoping the guy behind you blocks. And I mean, last lap of the Daytona 500, if that move would have been made, well, maybe not the way they're racing, but if that move would have been made on lap 75, might have lifted. Might have jumped the whole field lifting.
This race, he wouldn't have lifted anyways. No one was lifting for anything on lap 2.
Yeah, so I mean, I hated it for Eric Almirola. I mean, I was rooting for him hardcore. I've never been a big Austin Dillon fan. I still don't buy the hype with him. I got to see Austin Dillon win a race. And I know people will go, but Trevor, he's won 2 races. He survived this one. And then, he won the Coke 600 last year because Jimmy Johnson ran out of fuel with half a lap to go.
Yeah, well, and very rarely will you ever actually win a race at Daytona or Talladega.
No.
Generally, you've survived it.
But it's a combination of both, normally. I mean, if Ryan Blaney would have won the race, Ryan Blaney would have won the race. You look at Brad Keselowski last couple of years in Talladega, you've kind of had that feel. At no point until 1 to go did I say, I think Austin Dillon's going to win this race.
No, I don't think anyone did. I think on that last restart, you're going, okay, this is going to be Denny Hamlin. This is going to be Eric Almirola. Darrell Wallace has been good. I thought it would be Hamlin, Almirola, Wallace, or Blaney. One of those 4. I was rooting for Chris Buescher, but I realistically knew it wasn't going to happen. Yeah, one thing is, it's still cool to see Austin Dillon win in that 3 car. That's going to make a lot of people happy. But still, I wasn't rooting for him to win either. I was wanting someone else to win. And I think it's, how many years in a row now has it been that it's been a first-time Daytona 500 winner? The last one that would have repeated was Dale Earnhardt Jr. in 2014. So this will be the 4th year in a row. Yeah, and you go back, you look at and the thing with the Daytona 500 is it's such a crapshoot. I mean, you look at the guys that have won it in the last 12 years. It's been more of a crapshoot in the last 10 or 12 years. Kurt Busch last year, who was an average driver all year, call it like it is. Denny Hamlin that year had a good year. Can't take it away from him.
Joey Logano, good year that year. I mean, probably could have ended up winning the championship. Trevor Bayne, Jamie McMurray. I mean, Matt Kenseth, the year that he won it the first time. It's just such a crapshoot. It's about being in the right place and at the right time.
Well, and a lot of guys that had, were favored when you looked at who's going to win this race. A lot of guys that said, these are the guys we think are going to win. Well, they weren't there at the end.
Yeah, my pick was Chase Elliott.
Guys like Jimmy Johnson, Eric Jones, Chase Elliott, Brad Keselowski, Kevin Harvick, Ricky Stenhouse. None of these guys were there in that big pack at the end of the race. And that kind of takes away from the finish a little bit when these guys all wreck out early. It would have been nice to see all of these guys battle at the end of the race. And then real quick, one other guy I want to talk about that up until I think he was involved in the incident with Chase Elliott, but Matt DiBenedetto was having a fantastic run, making all the right moves. And then when you wreck at the front of the field, it makes it real hard for these guys back there to miss it. But I just want to real quick give Matt DiBenedetto a shout out for the run he had going.
And maybe I'm a little crazy, but I think had he not got caught up in it, I think it would have been a huge factor in the end. I'm not sure he would have won, but I think you could have seen him pushing somebody, finishing second or third. I really do think that. Justin Marks, I know he didn't finish 12th. There were some good runs by some guys that their teams really, really needed it. Michael McDowell, driving for Front Row Motorsports, finishes 9th. David Gilliland, I believe it's just a one-off deal maybe. He finishes 14th. So some good runs for some guys.
Real quick, with a team like David Gilliland's finishing 14th, that might give them enough that we might see that car now a couple times the rest of this year. Where they were planning on just running the 500, but we might now see them back at Talladega. We might see them show up at another mile and a half just because now they've got, they get some decent prize money and they maybe can pick up some sponsors and we might see them later in the year. Yeah,
potentially, definitely a place like you said, like Talladega or Daytona again. Let's just kind of jump in now. We have about 20 minutes left. You look at NASCAR, and there's a lot of NASCAR fans that are old timers, so to say, and they're the get off my lawn people as far as they don't like all the changes, the chase and everything. And they will say the sport is dying, which I would argue every sport is dying a slow and painful death, with the exception of maybe the NBA. You look around and in college football, those are the only two that aren't dying a slow and painful death. But I think with NASCAR now, for these people that are concerned about the recent retirements of superstars like a Tony Stewart, like a Jeff Gordon, Dale Jr. is a superstar because of his last name, Carl Edwards, those guys.
Matt Kenseth,
yep, forgot about him.
Real quick, just talk about the guys that maybe weren't superstars that have left in the last couple of years. Greg Biffle, Jeff Burton.
Yeah, Mark
Martin. You've got a lot of guys that have left the sport.
It's a cycle thing, and I think the future of the sport is just fine when you look at the talent.
I kind of laugh at that with the guys we've got here. This is a really talented bunch of young drivers, and one other thing is the Daytona 500 sold out.
Yeah,
and I know it's down. They've removed some seats, but it's still sold out. Mm-hmm. And with these young kids, and I call them kids because they're still like 22, 23, 24. I'm 19, so that really.
Well, William Byron's 20?
Yeah, he's a sophomore in college, and you look at these guys, and they've got personality, they've got character, they've got things that you can root for outside of just what they do on the racetrack, and that's something that this last batch of guys, we don't necessarily see as much personality. They were it was that first real corporate suppression almost.
Jimmy Johnson, I love Jimmy Johnson, but Jimmy, you're kind of seeing that circle out. Jimmy's a business guy, really, so to speak. But you got Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, Bubba Wallace. I think all four of those kids have it all. Well, I think they have every. Bubba, I'm not as sure about. I got to see more from him. But definitely those three, I think they have what it takes to be. And Kyle Larson have what it takes to be really, really successful.
And then there's guys like Alex Bowman, William Byron, Eric Jones, Daniel Suarez.
I would even put Chris Buescher in there.
Chris Buescher's an extremely talented race car driver, and even Matt DiBenedetto, he's been there a while. He's still only 26.
Yeah.
And if he's someone, I think if you put him in a Stewart Haas and a Gibbs and in a powerhouse team, he's going to become a superstar.
And you got to think too, guys like Joey Logano. Joey Logano's only 28 years old. I know it seess like he's been around forever because
Ricky Stenhouse.
Trevor Bayne. The Roush is improving again. Kyle Busch is only 32, 33. So the future of the sport is just fine.
And then you also have to look at who's behind these guys right now. You got guys like Christopher Bell, and I'm real high on Daniel Hemrick. I think Daniel Hemrick, if they can find the sponsors for him and get him to the Cup Series, and then a couple guys you've said you've got to see more from, but they're still the Dillon brothers. They're young and they're here. Austin's got enough talent. We still need to see a lot more from Ty, but the amount of talent that's young right now in this sport, there's a lot of guys you can get behind. There's a lot of guys that have personality. But one thing that NASCAR was talking about is a lot of times they look at the average lineup for the 500, and it's like at 37, 38 years old. When you look at all the other sports, they're down in the 20s. Well, this year they put up a graphic where it's like, okay, we got closer this year. The average age of the Daytona 500 field is right around somewhere like 32 years old.
Well, and that could have been skewed, too, because you had a 66-year-old Mark Thompson who finished 22nd on the lead lap, or a couple laps down.
It ended up being 4 laps down.
Yeah, so, that number goes down drastically if you take him out of it. I mean, maybe down into the high 20s. So, yeah, the sport's gotten younger. There are new faces in here, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It's a cycle.
Well, if you look at almost the demographics of where the sport's missing fans, it's our age. Mm-hmm. It's the 16 to 29-year-olds is where it's missing, and you bring 22, 23, 24-year-olds that have personality too. Are very active on social media and do different things, and the guys that like Jimmy Johnson, these Kevin Harvicks, they do a little bit of stuff differently.
We brought Daniel Suarez. We didn't even mention Daniel Suarez.
Well, and he's going to bring a whole other group of people from another country into the sport.
And that's the thing, too, with these guys is, you look at a guy like Daniel Suarez and a guy like Bubba Wallace, they can bring in a different demographic to the sport that is good for the sport, and they have the talent with it, is the thing. I don't see where it's a bad thing. When I look at this, I would say I'd be willing to bet money that between, I'll just throw these 4 out here because I think they're most likely, between Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, and Alex Bowman, those 4 will combine for at least 8 wins this year.
That's not.
And I think you could say Larson and Blaney between them could get that. So I like those 4 are the ones on the highest on. I got to see more from Bubba Wallace before I jump on him because it's Daytona. I like Bubba Wallace a lot. I like the way he carries himself. But if he goes out next week and finishes 12th, yeah, I'll be. But if he goes out next week, doesn't have any troubles and finishes 29th. I don't know. And William Byron's a guy that'll take him some time.
Yeah, and William Byron's still 20. I know he was really the difference between the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series is extremely different. He'll figure it out. I think he'll be a guy. We'll see him a lot of 14th, 15th place finishes.
And then I think he'll have a couple finishes where it'll be boom, he finishes 3rd. Something like that.
And that's where the difference with Bubba, and these are the 2 rookies of the year. These are the only 2 rookies that are going to be able to fight for that. That's William Byron, Darrell Wallace Jr. William Byron's going to be consistently right around 12th to 18th. Darrell Wallace, I think we're going to see some runs where he gets 26th, 27th. Not because he crashes, just because he was not good that day. And then we'll see him finish 3rd, 4th. Yeah. He'll have some runs like that. And what that'll do is that'll actually make for, I know it's only 2 guys, but a very competitive, interesting Rookie of the Year race.
Well, it was the same way you think back to when Jimmy Johnson and Ryan Newman came in. Jimmy Johnson was more consistent, but Ryan Newman peeled off a lot more wins that year and would have weeks where he'd finish 29th or 30th and then win. So, I don't know. Let's just take a look real quick. We'll do some – we'll kind of tell the future here. So, other than Chase Elliott, when you look at the guys that have not had a win yet, because I think Chase Elliott will be the first one to get a win, who do you think is most likely to get their first career win?
You got to look to that Joe Gibbs Racing stable and Eric Jones and Daniel Suarez. I think both of those guys could get into victory lane this year, really more so being Eric Jones. He had several good runs last year. Now that he's with Gibbs, he's got a couple veterans in Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch, but he's with essentially the mothership team with Gibbs and not with the side team at Furniture Row. Being the second team at Furniture Row, he's got a lot more resources. I think Eric Jones will end up in victory lane this year.
I'm going to go a little outside of the box. I'm going to go Alex Bowman. You think about it, they'll be in Phoenix in a couple weeks, and you go back to when he filled in for Dale Earnhardt Jr. at Phoenix, he probably should have won that race. And he's a kid that has a lot of potential. And you look at the runs he had in his last handful of runs with Rick Hendrick a couple years ago, 7th, then he got caught up in a wreck at Talladega, 13th at Texas, 6th at Phoenix, 16th at Miami, and then 17th last week.
You got to remember that race at Phoenix. He was fighting. He led some of that race. He was fighting for the win late in that race and got into, I think it was Matt Kenseth late in that race, put him back in the running order. So he ended
up finishing 6th, too, in that race.
Well, and what a lot of people don't know about Alex Bowman is he ran for BK Racing for several years in the Cup Series when he was 19, 20, 21 years old. I think they said he's got over 80 Cup starts already. He
has 82.
Team, although it wasn't with the top level team, Alex Bowman's been a Cup Series driver. He's not a rookie, and he's not a rookie by a long shot. So you've got more experience in that 88 car than what a lot of people think.
But he's only 24 years old. Isn't that crazy? I mean, he ran for RAB Racing, too, in the Xfinity Series for a couple years. Well, it was the Nationwide then. And had some good runs. So I think of him, Eric Jones, I would probably put second. Like I said, I got to see more from Bubba Wallace before I can put him up there. Daniel Suarez has been one of those guys. I think he's starting to get it figured out. I don't know if we'll see him win this year, but I think we'll see him reel off some top 3s, maybe some top 2s. William Byron, probably not this year. Next year I would be willing to say that. And like I said, Chase Elliott, he's going to win one at some point.
And Chase, he's got, 8 seconds?
I think.
And when you've got someone like that's put together good run after good run after good run, it's a cliche, but when he gets one, you said this before we started today, he's going to get 4 or 5 or 6.
Well, look at Casey Kane. I mean, when he came out, Casey Kane, I think, had 7 or 8 second-place finishes before he got one. Then he started peeling them off. Kyle Larson, same thing. I mean, Kyle Larson had 8 or 9 second-place finishes before he ended up getting a win. And once he got one, he's won 6 since then. So it's all cyclical.
And one thing that I want to put on the record so we can make fun of me later is with the driver lineup we've got this year, with the way everyone, I don't think we're going to have someone dominate the season.
I don't think so.
Last year. I think NASCAR is going to have a problem. I know there's only 26 regular season races, but I think it's a very likely possibility we're going to get down to the chase and go, nobody's in on points.
I think that's
There's 16 winners.
Because what they had last year, 14, and that was because Logano wasn't. I think that's a very strong possibility when you look at the young guys and what we have in the sport. I could stand behind that 100% because I think obviously your Jimmy Johnson's going to get a win somewhere. Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Truex, Brad Keselowski, Logano, those guys are going to find wins. I think Logano last year struggling was just kind of a one-off thing.
Well, you've got to remember that Logano did win a race last year. It was just that whole encumbered thing, and that's what kept him out of the chase.
I think Denny Hamlin will get a win, at least one. And you never know. You throw in a guy like Ryan Newman, who there's just some tracks he runs really good at.
And one guy we talked about who we didn't talk about because he's already gotten a win, and that's Ryan Blaney. He's someone that could get a couple wins this year as well too.
I think you could see them get there and there be 16.
What about a guy like Clint Boyer?
Yep. There's tracks he runs really well at. Obviously Kyle Larson. And you get the resurgent plates, you can't count out Ricky Stenhouse Jr. or Trevor Bayne.
Or at this point, because of what we saw from Eric Almirola at the 500, you've got him. You've got any of the Fords can really win at these restrictor plate.
You get to the road courses, you get A.J. Allmendinger. I mean, you could get a situation where you have 16 guys. You go into Indy, that feels weird to say, for the last race of playoffs, and you have 16 different winners, and then it's okay, well, someone's got to win and bump. Then they'll go off points, so it's like, well, it doesn't really matter.
Wouldn't that be something that would actually make Indy fun to watch?
Yeah.
We've got 16 winners, and we're coming down to the end of this race, and someone that hasn't won yet is leading. And then whoever's up in the booth is just going to have their pencil flying.
Rick Allen's going to be number crunching.
Yeah, so who's not going to make it now? Because we got to go back.
It goes back off points. Yeah, that'd be fun. I'd be all for that. So hopefully this season's crazy. It gets boring when it's, I like Martin Truex a lot, but there was a point last year where it was like, okay.
Even though the chase makes it a little bit more unpredictable, you really could sit there and go, okay, Martin Truex Jr. is going to win this championship.
I think I had the final 4. I nailed 3 of the 4 because it was what, Busch, Truex, Harvick, and
Keselowski,
and I had Busch, Truex, Harvick, and Kyle Larson. So I mean, I nailed 3 of the 4 in September. So it was pretty predictable. I don't think this year is going to be predictable.
Nope.
Yeah. So
I wouldn't be surprised that when because I think we're going to make our picks here before we wrap up, is if both of our entire championship 4 is not there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very strong possibility. Let's go jump in real quick, make our picks for Atlanta this week. The Quick Trip Folds of Honor 500 will take place Sunday afternoon. Last year's winner was Brad Keselowski. Other notable winners that are going to be at this race: Casey Kane, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Kurt Busch, and Jimmy Johnson. Jacob, who are you picking this week?
This race is really a little bit more of a up-in-the-air race than just because of the tire wear at Atlanta and the strategies you can get. And it's really the only track on the schedule where the tire limit actually comes into play. And this race is really more won on top of the pit box than it is out on the racetrack. And that's weird saying at any other track other than Daytona. But it's a big strategy with tires. But that being said, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ryan Blaney in victory lane. I'm making that's just kind of off the top of my head right now after what happened in Daytona, dominating that race. I think he might come into Atlanta a little bit fired up and win early. And I think that's going to be the trend is we're going to be, going like, okay, guys, like, okay, Jimmy Johnson's good at Atlanta. Who's good at Atlanta? And then Ryan Blaney wins. And I think that's something we could see a lot this year. But I think Ryan Blaney will get a win early.
Yeah, I think so too, but I don't think it comes this weekend. I'm going to go with a guy that has ran super, super duper good in the last 6 races in Atlanta and has nothing to show for it. In the last 6 races, he has led an average of 140 laps per race at Atlanta. You know who that is?
See, I feel like I should, and as soon as you say it, I'm going to be like, yep.
Yeah, it's the same guy I picked to win the Xfinity race. I got to go with Kevin Harvick. You think back last year, he absolutely owned that race.
He does own Atlanta. He just doesn't seem to want to win.
Well, and a lot of times he shoots himself in the own foot. You like last year, he had a pit road penalty. I can't remember if it was too fast entering or too fast exiting. It was something he did on pit road that ended up putting him back. He ended up finishing 9th, and Brad Keselowski won.
That is one thing, just to mention, is this race will be most likely determined on pit road. With that new rule that we mentioned at the start of the show was going down to 5 guys. At Daytona with the draft, you really didn't see much of the effects of it. We're going to see that at Atlanta. We're going to see some bad pit stops, some guys that make mistakes, and you could be like, Kevin Harvick dominates the race, should win, and then he has a 25-second pit stop and restarts 16th with 40 to go and can't get back there.
So we're both going forwards. You got Ryan Blaney. I'm going to take Kevin Harvick this week. Got a couple minutes. Let's go ahead and jump into our 2018 championship predictions. I know we're 1 race in, but it was Daytona, so you can't really take anything away from it. Your championship 4 would be who?
See, we've mentioned the young guys, and I think we're within 2 years for sure of some of these older guys like Jimmy Johnson, Truex, Harvick just being locked out of winning the championship because the young guys are going to take the stage. But I think this year we're going to get one veteran. I think it's going to be Denny Hamlin. I think he's finally going to, because Denny Hamlin's been a guy that you're just kind of like, well, he's not elite, but he's right there. I think he might make that step for 1 year and be there. I've also got Kyle Larson. I've got Chase Elliott, and then I've got Ryan Blaney. That's my championship 4.
We've got pretty similar. I'm kind of the same way with Denny Hamlin this year. I think we have 2 of those young guys in there. And you got both of them that I do. I think with Blaney, I think there's going to be some races where he's not consistent. I think that's just going to be him kind of getting acclimated to a car with more speed than what he had. I think Ryan Blaney will be one of those guys I think will make the chase. He might be a guy that comes in and is dominating and comes in the chase with 4 or 5 wins like Kyle Larson did last year, and then it just all unravels for him. So I'm going to go Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, and Brad Keselowski. I think Keselowski's going to be fast this year as well.
Yeah, and I believe both of us, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I think we could both agree with this. I'm making that with like 12% confidence.
Yeah, now that I say that, it's going to be Jimmy Johnson, Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, and then Eric Almirola or somebody like that, totally out of right field. So if you're championship 4, who would you be your championship prediction this year? I feel like we might end up going the same one.
I'm going Kyle Larson.
Yep, we're going the same one. I think Kyle Larson, had he not got caught up in Talladega last year, I think he would have won it last year.
Well, and really, if you look at a lot of it, this is another cliche, but you got to lose one before you win one. He lost one last year.
Yeah, he might have actually lost 2, because 2 years ago, he was kind of clicking at the right time, and then he had some bad luck. And I think Kyle Larson's a guy that he's kind of learned from his mistakes, and he reminds me an awful lot of Jeff Gordon. When you watch, I mean, Jeff Gordon those first couple of years was reckless, and he lost a lot of races he shouldn't have lost, and he lost a championship he shouldn't have lost. Kyle Larson maybe kind of the same way last year. I like Kyle Larson a lot. I know people go, but Trevor, he didn't run good at Talladega. Daytona, Kyle Larson never runs good at restrictor plates.
Kyle Larson, if you watch his cars at restrictor plate tracks, I don't know how he wrecks going into turn 1 of the first lap of every single restrictor plate track. race that. He just doesn't seem to. And there's guys that just don't seem to understand how to race restrictor plate tracks. And honestly, he might be someone that just might not ever get it.
But then he's a surprisingly sneaky good road course racer. I mean, you think about it. He probably will never dominate, but he'll rattle off a fourth, or he's I think had a top 10 on like the last couple of road courses. So, yeah, I like Kyle Larson as well for my championship pick, and then I can see how this will happen. He'll end up not winning a race all year and finish like 19th in points.
With the way I think this year could end up, that is as much of a possibility of happening as him winning the championship.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, there's 12 or 14 guys. I think he's got a chance. I think all the championship four I just mentioned have a chance. I think Blaney's got a chance. I think Jimmy Johnson's got a chance. I wouldn't surprise me if we see a bounce back from him. I think Harvick's got a chance. Truex, those guys.
This year is going to be like the NCAA college basketball tournament, where if you can get in, you have a shot to win.
Yeah, most likely.
That's going to be the chase.
Yeah, so that'll definitely be fun. That'll do it for our first episode of the No Cautions podcast. I guess tune in on Sunday to catch the race at Atlanta so you can know what we're talking about next week. And we'll watch it too so we know what we're talking about next week. And we'll be back here next week for another edition of the No Cautions podcast. For Jacob Blair, this is Trevor Mader.